Welcome to Inside West Point, Ideas that Impact. I'm Brigadier General Shane Reeves, the Dean of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Through a series of discussions, we will show you a different side of West Point, where we will make even our most complex initiatives accessible to broad audiences, and give you an inside view to our cross-disciplinary work, which is being applied throughout the world. There are certain things that happen at West Point where oftentimes you will look back later in life and go, I cannot believe the opportunity I had as a cadet. And this is one of those evenings. This is an all-star panel from an eclectic group of professions, and they're all here to talk to you and help develop you and really talk about mentorship and leadership, as well as a number of other things that will be quite transformational for you. Now, I chose the Yearling class to come and listen tonight for some very particular reasons. And one of them is you've been followers as plebes. You've observed and learned from the cadets and staff and faculty around you. You're currently helping mold the plebes as team leaders, but you're fast approaching what I think is one of the most transformational inflection points for cadets, and that's affirmation. You are right on the cusp of affirmation, where you will take on a greater role in the Corps of Cadets, but also you will be asked to confirm your commitment to serving in the United States Army and defending the great Constitution of the United States of America. And this is a really important juncture in your cadet career, and it's an important one for you to engage with and reflect on what we discussed here this evening, as it helps you chart your path forward and to think about that really important obligation that you're about to take in a few short months. And I'm so thankful that we have this panel here to help us as we think through that. So I'm going to do some brief intros, and then we're going to jump right into it. Our first guest, I'm sitting right here to my right, I'm just going to go right down here, is Miss Dina Powell McCormick. She's got an amazing bio. Successful philanthropist, businesswoman, and leader who has served in the White House of Personnel and the State Department under President George W. Bush. She also spent time as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategy during the first Trump administration. Mrs. Powell McCormick worked at Goldman Sachs for a number of years, rising to the top ranks before departing to assume her current role as a partner and vice chairman and president of global client services at the merchant bank BTD and MSD Partners. She also has served as a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, as a chair for the Robin Hood Foundation, a trustee of the National Geographic Society Board, a trustee of the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, a member of the board of Mount Sinai Hospital, and a member of the board of the Atlantic Council. Needless to say, she's accomplished, extremely busy, and we are so appreciative that you are here to spend some time with us. So thank you, ma'am, for being here.
So honored.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
A second member of our panel is Senator Dave McCormick. He's no stranger to the United States Military Academy. He's West Point class of 1987. He even has a room dedicated to him in the Thayer Hotel, which I have tried to stay in, and I've been denied multiple times. Here it's pretty nice.
I doubt that.
Yeah. They're married. They can do whatever they want. So, Senator McCormick comes from the great state of Pennsylvania. Where's the Pennsylvanians out there? He served in the 82nd Airborne Division, where he deployed to the Middle East during the first Gulf War, has his PhD in international relations from Princeton University, worked as CEO and president of both Free Markets and Ariba Incorporated, and served as both the Undersecretary of the Treasury for International Affairs and the Deputy National Security Advisor under President George W. Bush. He also became CEO of Bridgewater Associates in 2020, one of the largest and most successful investment firms in the world. I would say his time as an Army wrestler and a mechanical engineer prepared him well for all of this. Now, I will tell you what's most amazing to me about Senator McCormick, Mrs. Powell McCormick, is this. They are happily married, and they jointly wrote a book. That's amazing to me. That would not happen. I'm looking at my wife, Kimberly, and she's like, nope, that wouldn't happen with us. We would not do that. So thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
Give the senator a round of applause. So we also have the privilege of having with us tonight Mr. Brian Grazer. He is a Golden Globe, Emmy, and Oscar-winning producer. Wait, no round of applause till I get done at the bio. Hold it together over there. So he's been making movies and TV programs for more than 40 years.
His influential works include such titles as Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, Friday Night Lights, 8 Mile, one of my personal favorites, Real Genius, which is a movie I know that our staff who love lasers and the cadets who also care about lasers have seen many, many times. If you haven't, we'll arrange a special screening to ensure you get the best and well-rounded education you deserve. Mr. Grazer is also a New York Times best-selling author, and we are very thankful that he is here tonight to share some leadership lessons with us. So thank you, sir.
Best movie ever.
Finally, last but certainly not least, is a welcome back to Mr. Alex Gorsky, who's USMA class of '82, the select few. Like Senator McCormick, he's not a stranger to West Point. He and his wife have been incredible supporters of the Academy for so long. He's a frequent speaker at numerous events. He's most recognizable from his time leading Johnson & Johnson, where he rose through the ranks, taking the role of CEO in 2012 and becoming the executive chairman in 2021. And he retired from J&J in 23. Mr. Gorsky received his MBA from Wharton School of Business in '96. And it'd be easier for me to tell you the boards he doesn't sit on, but I'll just start with a number. He sits on the board of Apple, IBM, JP Morgan Chase, and the Travis Manin Foundation. I'd also point out, he earned his Ranger tab as a cadet, which our superintendent did also. And that's amazing, but I bet you he could never say, like you all can after this, that he went to an evening lecture on a Sunday with the dean. That's special. That is special. So please welcome Mr. Gorsky.
Thank you.
So we're going to jump right into this. I have a couple of questions for all of our panelists. I'm going to start right here with Mrs. Powell McCormick. So, ma'am, you've helped launch mentoring programs in both the public and private sectors, leading to the creation of hundreds of jobs all around the world. Why is mentoring so important, particularly for entrepreneurs?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dean.
Yes, ma'am.
It's such an honor to be with all of you tonight, the superintendent. Thank you so much. It's such a privilege. I'm honestly a little bit overwhelmed as I look across this room. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your service to our country. You make us all so incredibly proud. And being here at West Point, I feel like saying thank you for shaping this man into who he is today. This is probably one of the most seminal experiences of his life, and it really just makes me so proud. One of my mentors is here. So as I get into how it is that a immigrant from Cairo, Egypt, who immigrated here to the United States when I was 5 years old, didn't speak any English. My family immigrated to Texas. I always say I was 5 years old, so I learned English pretty quickly, but Texan took me a lot longer. Growing up, my parents used to say to me and my sisters, you can be anything that you want to be. We left our homeland so that you could pursue your dreams, as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. So it wasn't a lot of optionality for me. And as I was paying for college, waitressing at the University of Texas, thinking I was heading to law school so that my parents would be happy, I had this fateful chance to meet an incredible woman, a senator, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, who actually gave me the chance to go to Washington. And that was a path that I'd never thought of. But another pretty seminal moment in my life, after I'd worked for almost 8 years for President Bush, and very tough years. It was after 9/11. It was an extraordinary time for our nation. So many, I know, of your family members served. I know the superintendent, the dean, so many of you here served our country at that time. But there was a man named John F.W. Rogers who's here. He drove all the way to be with us. And I was working in Washington. He had worked for President Reagan, for President Bush. Today, he chairs not only the Reagan Foundation Board, but the White House Preservation Association. He loves this country so much that he buys every piece of paraphernalia of every president in every auction. And he said, I see something in you. And I think you should leave Washington with your 2 little babies and come and work at Goldman Sachs. Now, I didn't tell him at the time math was not my specialty, and I didn't have a huge background in banking, but he saw something in me, and it takes one person that sees something. And together we were able to build some extraordinary programs called 10,000 Women, 10,000 Small Businesses, and 1 Million Black Women. They were centered around entrepreneurship, and so it was important to give business education and capital. But the single most important thing I think those programs gave was confidence. Confidence to be an entrepreneur, because it is a pretty lonely thing to do.
So, ma'am, when you said you worked your way through, well, first off, you got here when you were 5 and had to learn English, and then you worked your way through college, and eventually you landed in 2 White Houses and Goldman Sachs. But oftentimes you'd be the only woman in the room in those situations. How did the mentors you meet along the way contribute to your success in these different environments?
Well, it's interesting being here. And since Dave and I have 6 daughters between us, I want to do a special shout out to the incredible young women in this room. If I could maybe give you especially a couple of pieces of advice because of the extraordinary privilege I had, often being the only woman in the room in a few, what I'd say, male-dominated industries, whether it was finance or frankly even in government. I was often the only woman in the room in the Oval Office or the Situation Room, or with John in the Management Committee room at Goldman. And there's a few important things that I learned. The first is that you actually have to have male mentors. If you're in a male-dominated place, you actually want the perspective of the people that kind of make up most of the room if you're going to grow and learn, which means you have to actually take tough feedback well. I have a feeling the young women in this room do that well. I had a boss, John and I's boss, Lloyd Waingfine, the CEO of Goldman. I used to tell him, boy, that's a lot of tough love, but I appreciate you being my mentor. And he would say, or perhaps we should call me your tormentor. But that was actually really important to get that kind of tough love. There's nothing more important, especially for women, than to actually get that kind of feedback. The other piece of advice that I'll end with is that it is, I think, honestly tougher for women to be in an environment where, you know, they maybe aren't going to do everything perfectly. And we have a tendency to look backwards. I didn't do that perfectly. I messed up. 80% of the meeting I did a good job in, but that 20% I wish I could redo. Well, I had a male mentor once tell me, you know what, men never do that. They look forward. They don't look back. And I think that is something that was transformational for me. The third and final thing that I think not enough of us talk about, men and women, is that you don't grow from success. You honestly only grow from failure. And in that moment when you're failing, it really hurts. It really stings. But there's no chance that you're going to really grow, move on to the next thing, and find your purpose in life without having failed. And that's something that those mentors really instilled in me.
And so, ma'am, in that spirit of mentorship, what made you decide to write a book?
Well, I maybe should turn that one over to my husband. I have to give him credit. It was your idea.
Well, we lived through COVID with our 6 daughters with us in the house, and one of the things we noted was that they weren't with their teachers, they weren't with their coaches. Everybody was sort of isolated. All of you in the audience lived through that probably in high school, and we started to talk about how mentors had made such a difference for Dina and me. In my case, it was a football coach who, you know, I was a kind of a bench warmer my sophomore year in high school. This coach came in, a new coach came in, the old coach got fired. This guy watched all the films and kind of saw something in me, made me the co-captain of the team. I ended up being all-state in football, and that helped me get into West Point. And so that guy changed my life. Same thing for Dina. Someone changed her life. And so we started to talk to our friends. Some of them, you know, extremely successful. These 2 guys here, Brian and Alex, both dear friends, both at the top of their fields, extraordinary success. We talked to many people. The one thing we found with all successful people was that they had somebody or some buddies along the way that helped them become who they are. Nobody does it alone. And so we had started to think about it. I said, why don't we write a book about not the fancy people, not the famous people like Brian and Alex, but the people that you never heard of that helped them become who they are. And so that was the purpose of it. And the message was, we all need help. We all need mentorship. And so we wanted everybody reading this book to ask themselves, who believed in me? Because all of us have people, you all, even early in your lives, probably have people that believe in you. Did you take a chance to say, take the opportunity to say thank you? Because many times when we interview people, we found that, geez, I don't even think they know. They changed my life, or they're gone. God forbid they already died. And then what are you doing? What are you doing to mentor others? What are you doing to help pass it along? Because the world's a really complicated place and there's so much polarization. Sometimes it's overwhelming. I'm in the middle of the sentence. It's overwhelming sometimes. But if you go micro, not macro, and you say, I can make a difference by getting involved in someone's life, helping them become their best selves, through that process, you can help that person make a huge difference. You can help them help their community, you can help them help their country. The 25 people in our book changed the world, and it was because other people invest in them. So that's what we learned through the project, and that's why we wrote the book. And so what we're hoping it does is inspires a movement where we get everybody to start thinking about paying it forward. Even you all who are early in your career, you can pay it forward and help people become their best selves.
So, Senator, let me back up a little bit and ask you, you served in the Army and during the first Gulf War. Can you talk specifically about what mentorship and how it plays in the military, the importance of it in the military?
Well, I think mentorship and leadership are close cousins, but they're not exactly the same thing, because a mentorship relationship takes a certain level of investment that you can't do across hundreds of people. And it has a couple components. One is it's got to be based on trust. You got to be able to be very vulnerable with your mentor and lay it all on the line. It's based on shared values of what you think is important. It's based on a commitment, because oftentimes you need that mentorship when things are toughest. You can't wait, let's talk next month. You're in the middle of a crisis, you need help. And it takes the ability to lift you up and help you get confidence when things are going in the wrong direction. And that's the one thing throughout our book. Almost everybody that's successful has failed. You never hear about the failures, but everybody fails. And it's just not whether you fail, it's how you overcome it. And in the military, I had a lot of good mentors, but I had a battalion commander in the 82nd who was fabulous. I admired him. He took our unit to Iraq. And, I was a hotshot lieutenant. I was an honor graduate of Ranger School. I came to my battalion. I was a great lieutenant. And I went to Jumpmaster School. And so I go through Jumpmaster School. And on the last test of the day, which the soup will know about, you do an inspection of a jumper. I missed a little piece of the reserve parachute sticking out. I failed. 2 weeks I failed. I thought I had like a big F written across my chest. And I went back to my unit with my head hanging low. I was so humiliated and embarrassed. And I went out to PT that first morning. This was after I'd failed the test. And the colonel obviously knew it. And he could see I was dragging. He pulled me aside and said, listen, you're a great lieutenant. You're going to be, you're going to continue to do great things. This is a small setback. Don't let this get in your head. Move forward. You're going to go back in 3 months or 6 months, whatever, you're going to pass the test. I know it seems small now. Probably seems small even to all of you. It seems so big to me at the moment. That's the way it is with failure, we could go through it. I've failed many times. I've been fired as a CEO. I was in the front page of the Wall Street Journal for getting fired. This is what happens in life. You fail. It's not whether you fail, it's whether you get up. That's what mentorship helps you do. I'll stop, get off my soapbox, but it's a big part of it.
Is there a distinction between mentorship in the military and mentorship in business? And you've had success in both, sir, but how about, is there a difference in the way you perceive it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, obviously the stakes are higher because you're trying to, if you're mentoring someone in the military, you're trying to help them become a leader who will have the capacity under the most difficult circumstances to lead people into battle and, keep them safe and accomplish the mission. So the stakes are higher, but I don't think the characteristics are any different.
If you were going to tell the cadets here, obviously you already pointed out they can be mentors, but if they're also thinking to themselves, I'd like to seek a mentor, is does it just happen? Is it fortuitous? Or do you think there's a path to seeking the right type of person?
I'm sure these, all of us here and many in the front row here for sure, when you get to a certain point in your life, lots of people want your mentorship. And we talk in the book about something called transactional mentorship. How do you help me get the promotion? How do I get the meeting? How do I get the job? That's one thing, and you can help a lot of people do that. The kind of mentoring we're talking about is something very different. It's where you're really trying to help someone find their purpose in life, become their best selves. It's based on values and contribution. And you can't really do and transformation, right? It's transformational, and you can't really do that with a lot of people. And our experience is it sort of has to be organic, where you develop these relationships, and it's got to be a commitment on both sides, where the mentee can't be just saying, okay, how do I get the next promotion? But how do we have a relationship that's going to, help me navigate the future, but also be fulfilling for you? But believe it or not, when you get to a certain point, being a mentor is probably one of the most satisfying things you can do. So you want it to be with someone that you trust and you believe in. And so finding that match isn't always easy, but it's hard to do unless you sort of are willing to invest some time and real effort in it.
So sort of last question before I come to Brian, so prepare yourself, Brian. So the last question I have for you is this, so you were a wrestler at West Point. How did wrestling help prepare and shape you for your life and your career?
Well, I know we got a bunch of great Army wrestlers here. I'm very, very proud of the Army wrestling program. I know we have the coach right up here in the front row. So, Coach Ward. We got, I was just at Lehigh for the EIWA championships in Pennsylvania, where I got to see the coach and some of the great Army wrestlers. They took third, which very proud of them. And there's great things ahead for that team. I think the great thing about wrestling is that, for me, it represents the virtues and values that you want in leadership, because you gotta have the courage to step in the arena. You gotta have the resilience to keep coming. You gotta have the heart. In the last period, it's not about how good you are. I know my friend Dan Sullivan's here. He was the captain of the team in '85. Dan and I weren't the best wrestlers. We had a lot of heart. Wrestling's a lot about heart, and so once you've wrestled, Dan Gable's like a legendary figure. I don't know if you know Dan. I always thought someday maybe I'll meet Dan Gable. Dan Gable texted me the other day. I said, oh my God, Dan Gable texted me. And he said a great line, which is, once you've wrestled, everything in life is easy. And that's how I feel about it. Ranger School was easy compared to some of those wrestling practices. And I think it's a great preparation for life. And sports in general is as old General MacArthur said, are a great preparation for leadership in the military. But wrestling, I think, is pretty special.
That's how I feel about mill art. You all haven't taken it yet. Once you've done mill art, everything's easy after that. All right, so Brian.
Yes.
So you've had an incredible career that spanned multiple decades. And arguably, I think you'd be on the list of probably one of the most famous producers that exist, having won multiple awards, including Oscars, Emmys, and Grammys. Can you share with the cadets the story of who believed in you at the start of your career and why that kind of leadership displayed by your mentor changed your life?
Okay. I got straight Fs. Literally straight Fs, no Ds. And, that was elementary school. So, what you learn. So, and so my parents really didn't know what to do. I'd hear them whispering, should we put him back? And as though I wasn't hearing, but I was always hearing. And should they put me back a year? Should they take me into another school? What should they do? It turned out, of course, I had undiagnosed, very acute dyslexia. But I learned that out of college. In any event, so with my straight Fs, the person that believed in me was my little tiny grandmother, Sonia. Sonia was a risk taker. Sonia was an outlier. She was a very different kind of person, and successful, by the way. And Sonia would come every weekend, and she'd sit with me, and she would do a variety of things. She would take me on different adventures. We'd go to the first Japanese restaurant in the area. We'd meet the chef. We went to the Hollywood racetrack. We'd go to Dodger games. We did Vegas. We see Elvis once. Constantly doing different things. That was Sonia. And I was really close to Sonia. And she would see the straight Fs. And every time she'd see the straight Fs, she'd say, you are going to be successful. You're going all the way. You're going to make it. I believe in you. And she would go on and on about that until one day, I was now like in the 5th grade, and I said, you've seen these grades. I mean, you're over my shoulder. They're straight Fs. Like, do you have any there's no empirical evidence that what you're saying is going to ever become factual. Like, there's nothing. And so, but she'd just stay with it. She was very much about, what she did is she located a hidden strength. And that was that when I would say I don't know, I would always find out the answer. So that was just my natural reflex. There was often I'd say I don't know because I couldn't read. And then I would find ways, I was gigantically resourceful. I'd find out ways to get the answer to that question in full detail. And it was like, I was always having a beginner's mind even to this day. I find life endlessly curious and an endless adventure. So she was able to say that curiosity, and she'd use the phrase, you have a gift for gab. So, and I probably did at that time. So she felt like my communication skills and my curiosity was going to be the strength that would guide me forward. She didn't know where, but she knew it would be someplace that was winning. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I later, of course, was able, I was an autodidact, so I was able to teach myself and eventually got, of course, well, I was advised by my senior teacher of high school to absolutely not apply to college. Don't apply to college. I'm just telling you this as a friend, as your speech professor. That's what he was. And he said, go to an occupational school. And I thought, this is not good advice. I'm not going to do that. So I did apply to college. I went to USC, and I figured out the art of getting good grades, which wasn't necessarily transactional, but it was about synthesizing and then going to sleep with that synthesis and being able to assimilate that information. So it wasn't just memorized, but it was, I could operationalize it. And so that was very good for me in college. I then, out of college, I was supposed to go to law school. And I'd gotten into USC Law School, scheduled to go. But prior to law school, you get a job as a law clerk or whatever you can get. But if you can get a job as a law clerk, oddly, it was this serendipitous. I was in my apartment in Santa Monica. I listened through the window. I hear these two through my screen door, and I hear three guys who are USC grads, law school grads, and one of them says, "What was your easiest job?" I listened in, and all of a sudden, they're talking about what was the easiest job they had that summer. One of them said, "I've got you all beat with the cushiest job of all time." It was to be a law clerk at Warner Brothers. I never knew anything about Warner Brothers, nothing. I wasn't a media kid at that time. But I heard easiest job and that he had just quit. So I immediately get the number of Warner Brothers, and I call 843-6000, ask for the legal department, ask for who's in charge, Peter Connect, speak to this secretary, then to an assistant. I'm very good on those little auditions. And I get a meeting with Peter Connect, who'd started with Jack Warner in the day. He was about 80 years old. And he hires me like on the spot. And now I have this job. And it was the easiest job. There's no job that could have been easier. I had a corporate car. I had an office, a tiny little office, but literally nothing to do except walk down the halls and nose around and see what people were doing. And I exercised this skill of curiosity to learn a lot. Then I find that there's another office that becomes vacated other than my skinny, tiny little office with no windows. It's a very big office right outside the chairman of the board of Warner Brothers. And I say to my boss, Peter Connect, "Can I have that office?" He says, "Sure, I'll help you get it." So now I've got that office. So I was all set. That first lesson. So now I've got a year there in this office. I created a discipline of every single day I would meet a new person that was really doing something, principally the most important executive, the chairman of the board, the creator of MCA Universal was Jules Stein. I got a meeting with him. How did I do it? Begged his secretary. I said 1,000 different things. He said, if you meet Mr. Stein outside the gate of Universal, he will drive you in his car, have his car drive you to the Dodger pennant game, and you get out right as he's going in. I said, sure, I'll do it. So I was willing to do anything for a conversation that would enlarge my point of view or enrich my understanding of how this very opaque business of Hollywood worked. Because it is very opaque. There's so much, you're living in a fog. Anyway, I did that. I got fired. But I'd learned so much, and I learned from one great person named Lou Wasserman, who was the chairman of Universal. Am I going too long?
No.
Okay, I'll finish up.
Then he got the Oscar.
All right. So then what happens is I learned that you have to have something in your hand. Don't go just meet people. You can't be just a great conversationalist. You have to add value. I wrote a script. I then got nominated for an Oscar for writing that script, and it became the most successful movie at Disney, which I also produced in 9 years. So that was anyway, it starred Tom Hanks, who was absolutely nobody at the time, became Tom Hanks, and that began my career. So what I learned is, the thing that I would learn, depart to you, is not only do you want to connect with the right mentor, someone that absolutely believes in you and is interested in specificity, the thing that you might not know is your power, but they have that insight that it is. And that's very important. I also learned that you can literally do anything. That what I did was not magical. I've produced a lot of great movies and some that not so great, but with great intention. But basically, we all have the power to do and create the best part of our lives. You guys are all, to get here, I made a joke. I was with my son, and I was in his supervisor's house, and I said, wow, it seems like everybody's like a valedictorian. And I said this to one of the girls that was there, a cadet. I said, were you? Yes. It's like that every person, you guys, the majority of you are that. You can do absolutely anything if you just apply yourself, and a mentor will help sharpen your skills. I can leave off at that.
So
That's amazing.
I'm gonna unpack three things right there very quickly. One would be, I heard murmuring when he said USC. I bet you were debating, is that Southern California or South Carolina? I know. South.
University of Southern California.
Right.
Yeah.
So number two was the movie Splash. That's what I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the movie Splash.
Your parents will know it.
Yeah. And number three, I think you all should do what Brian did. Try to find an office right next to the soup's office. See what happens. Just take it. I think it'll work. He might give it to you. I don't know.
It might work.
He looks like he's up for it. You should just try it. All right, so over to Mr. Gorsky. So, sir, as CEO and business leader, why was mentorship so critical to the success, particularly of Johnson & Johnson?
Well, look, first of all, Dina, when you first told me about, being asked to be here tonight, of course, it's an incredible honor, but like you didn't tell me I was going to have to follow Dina, Dave, and Brian. Really? But no, it's a real honor to be up here with all of you, though, and just share some of the stories, because I learned a lot just listening from those stories on mentorship. But look, I'd be remiss if I didn't say it was pretty cool walking down the halls to get to this place tonight. What you're going to find when you're a graduate, and I know it's hard for you to even imagine that 35 or 40 years, one of you will likely be sitting up on a stage like this, hopefully giving even better counsel and advice and having gone on to do even more, greater things. But I remember like it was yesterday being a nervous, scared, anxious, and maybe somewhat proud plebe or yearling going through those hallways, sweating that I'm going to walk into the classroom. Am I going to, live up to the expectations, to the standards, failing my first TEE, doing better on something else? And I know at this point in your yearling year, You've got enough under your belt to say, okay, I got through plebe year, I got this. You're through some of the difficult courses now, your yearling year, but you're looking ahead going, oh, but I got more than 2.5 years to go. And it's hard to see light at the end of the tunnel, but stay strong. Before you know it, it will be in your rearview mirror, and it's pretty darn special when it is. But look, as I think about mentorship at Johnson & Johnson, I don't think it's that much different really than mentorship in the military, mentorship here at the academy, in that it probably shares more common fundamentals than there are differences. And look, I think, first of all, it starts, and they've mentioned this somewhat, with this understanding of a certain level of trust and belief in the other person. And it's got to be trust from one side in that you really believe that this relationship is worth investing in, and that you can enter a space where you can be open, you can be candid. Because what I found in life is sometimes people will talk about mentorship or leadership development, and one of the reasons why it can be so darn tough to develop yourself as a leader, because who you are as a leader is basically who you are as a person. It sounds easy, but someday somebody's going to be sitting across from you, and they're going to say, do you realize as a leader you do this, this, and this? And you go, yeah, but that's who I am. And they're going to say, that's the problem. And you're going to have to make a decision on, I'm not just dressing up and putting on my uniform to be a leader, but this gets to fundamentally who I am as a person. And if I'm not willing to address this particular strength or this particular challenge, then I'm never going to be the best person who I can become. So, starting out with that kind of core relationship of trust on one side, belief on the other, super important. I think the other thing that we found is that it's got to be an equal blend of listening and talking. Because it's only if you get someone who's frankly willing to invest the time, really get to know somebody, scratch the surface, go a little bit deeper than maybe the facade that you're trying to portray at a particular moment. And I think one of the words you heard earlier is to show a little bit vulnerability, because unless you're willing to do that, you're probably not going to get to some of those deeper issues. But then there's also a point where, hey, how do you impart knowledge? How do you share ideas? And how do you do it in a way where you're just not preaching, where you're not telling, but where you're actually sharing, like what you've heard tonight, real world examples that you can connect with, that make sense, and that ultimately you can walk out of the room and maybe do something with. And then, look, I think the last part that I always found in mentoring, and again, this was when I was in the Army or whether it was at J&J, is you got to have the right blend of support, but also, hey, you got to change. And, one story of mine that when I had left the Army, first started with Johnson & Johnson, I'd gone through a couple of roles, was in one of these leadership development programs where we did these deep 360s, and you read them and literally be in the fetal position, trying to absorb it all. And I remember going in and, some of the feedback I got was, well, you're just so West Point. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, you have an emphasis on doing everything right. You're looking this way, and that can put people on edge. And I thought, that's what this is what leadership was about being your best. It was about, always striving to be right, to be competitive, to do that. And through that dialogue, I think the insight for me that this mentor gave me is I said, people really don't want a perfect leader. Mm-hmm. They want a real leader. They want a leader who cares about them, who's going to not be afraid to let their guard down, who knows what works, what doesn't work. And that made a big impact on me. And when I think about it, through my career, those are the people that tend to build a ton of followership and be not only great mentors, but great leaders as well.
So would you be willing to tell a story of a particular mentor who believed in you and how that person shaped your leadership style over the years?
You know, I've been blessed to have multiple leaders. And I told the one story that had a massive impact on me, but you know, beyond that, look, my father was a Korean War veteran who also ended up being a pretty successful executive. My mother helped special education teachers, supported them. You know, their great balance of love on one hand, but challenge on the other was probably more fundamental in shaping who I am than anything else.
That's right. So the next question is really for all of you, and I have to take an opportunity. I'm gonna pivot just for a moment. I'm aware of the time, but it's a really important question for the Academy and for our cadets. And we have an academic year theme every year. And this year the theme is it's called the Human and the Machine Leadership on the Emerging Battlefield. And the thing that has become, we're very aware of, is how much technology is changing the nature of warfare and how the world is moving very, very quickly as you start to integrate machines with the human, and particularly on the battlefield. And so I would, and it's open to any of you, and it's just from your perspective, how do you see leadership changing as this integration with technology accelerates? Anybody?
Take it. Well, Dave, you want to start? I'll take it. Go ahead.
Senator, sir?
Well, I would just say,
Brian?
I think
Okay.
no. Dave, go. I can do it quickly without a long story. If you just a one-word answer, heart. I think being present, making yourself available, and heart.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I think technology can create more and more distance and make it much more difficult to connect. But I also think it offers an opportunity to think about things differently. So in my new job, there's 13 million people
Right.
in Pennsylvania, and it is really hard to shake everyone's hand. It's hard to hear them all. And so using technology as a mechanism to communicate. You know, the other day I did a town hall with 15,000 people, right? The ability to use video, the ability to have Zoom calls, the ability to use a variety of modalities and technology to not just one-way transmission, but to have an ongoing communication, to give you a sense of the pulse, what's really happening, to try to answer questions, to try to avoid misconceptions. I think it offers a superpower there if we can learn to humanize it and use technology as a way of using, it's a new way, but creating human connectivity and personal touch. So it's here to stay. And so my test, and I think a lot of leaders' test, the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to stick your head in the office and say, hey, how's it going? Using technology as a way to maintain that human connection, I think, is an opportunity.
And so you mentioned the distance, though. How do you make sure that distance isn't become that distance that's caused by the technology doesn't take away from your ability to actually lead the organization, or in your case, or the 13 million people?
Yeah, I think it's a personalization of it. In other words, it's a genuineness. It's a little bit of what everybody really here has said is that it's not perfection, it's real time. It's an honest, ongoing communication with people. You're making mistakes, you're getting new feedback. So as long as people see the leadership process where you can create true transparency. In some ways, you can create more transparency now with technology from a leadership perspective than any time before. So think how much confidence it should and will give people if we can let them in the room about the decisions we're making, why we're making them. So I think it offers an opportunity for genuine, authentic leadership in a way that it didn't before. But we have to use it. We have to enable it that way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
look, I think Brian's comment about heart, yours about leadership, is going to be so important. But I would also say, I think the next 10 years for all of you are likely going to see the most significant changes on the battlefield and in national security than we have probably seen for decades. And I think that it will be an incredible opportunity for all of you to shape things in a way that we're nowhere near the pace. Because if you look at some of these tools and the power that they now provide in the way they are shaping new ways of just thinking about almost every aspect of national security, I think it's going to provide you with a really special opportunity to be influential for decades to come.
I might take a little bit of a different angle on it, which is as I look at the men and women who are going to compete with our enemies around the world, and we are all worried, at dinner with the superintendent tonight, thinking about, is China going to be more advanced in technology? What's Russia going to do in cyber? And the truth is, I think it kind of comes back to what all three people here have just said about what's the difference between the United States and our adversaries and our competitors. And it reminds me of a story in the book. One of the chapters is about Condoleezza Rice, who I had the privilege of working for at the State Department. Very challenging time after 9/11. We would travel all around. And I remember being with her in a capital in the Middle East, this huge, big palace. We were meeting with the leader of the country. And frankly, he wasn't very respectful initially. She walked in the room. He looked over at her and he said, Madam Secretary, I'm glad you're here, but I hope you didn't come to preach to me about freedom and democracy. And I tensed up because I knew how tough Condi Rice was. And frankly, this man just wasn't prepared to see a female black Secretary of the State coming from the United States. She looked over at him and she said, well, Your Highness, how could I come and preach to you when my own country, not that long ago, counted me and my ancestors as 3/5 of a man? And yet here I sit before you as the Secretary of State of the United States of America. Your Highness, the difference between your country and mine is that America is on an imperfect journey where the rights of its people, our voices, and what we believe are our values will always beat yours because you aren't courageous enough to be on that kind of journey and give your people its voice.
So we have a few moments left. I just wanted to do a little bit of a quick lightning round to ask you all just a few questions. So would each of you be willing to tell us your favorite book? I'm the dean. There has to be an academic angle here, right? So what is your, and I'll start down with Mr. Gorsky and work our way down. Favorite book?
Undaunted Courage, the story of Lewis and Clark.
That's a great one.
I became attracted to a book called The Book of the Five Rings. It's about warfare, strategy, warfare, and manifesting, achieving through manifestation.
Thank you. Sir?
The Splendid and the Vile, about Churchill before the U.S. came into the war, leadership of honesty and authenticity in a time of darkness.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, it's going to look a little pandery, but I swear, even before I met Brian Grazer, A Beautiful Mind. A Beautiful Mind touched my heart when it was a book. But then when he turned it into an Oscar-winning movie for very extraordinary reasons, that for all of us that have children with any kind of issue, you feel a little lost, you feel like you have to protect them and the world doesn't understand them. And I think that that was a book that really spoke to me. And may I,
Yes, please,
Dean,
yeah.
do something I shouldn't, except that I know you guys have to get home and you have to hear the best story ever from Brian Grazer. Am I allowed to?
Of course.
Can I please ask you to tell the story? Because you eventually won the Oscar, right? For A Beautiful
Yeah,
Mind.
yeah, yes.
But would you tell them, because our theme here about ups and downs in life, about Apollo 13?
The whole story. Okay. Let me see how I can. Okay.
I promise you'll love it.
Apollo. Okay. So I've been nominated for a few Oscars, didn't win, and I'm thinking, someday, who knows, whatever. This is the Apollo 13 story. Let me clarify. Okay.
Yes.
And I get a 12-page treatment from Jim Lovell, the actual astronaut of Apollo 13, that actually went into to reach the moon and then had a tragic situation, a semi-tragic situation. Anyway, in any event, I got the 12 pages, turned it in, ready to turn it into a movie, and Ron Howard, Tom Hanks, and I, who are really good friends, we'd already made a few movies together, we said, what do you think this movie will make? And we all thought, we gave really low numbers, 30 million, and one said 40 million, and one said 6 million, like really low, because we all thought it'd be a really good movie. We were doing what we thought would be a good movie, but we thought everybody knew the end of the movie. They know he survived. So in any event, the movie goes out. It does exceptionally well globally, like in America, everywhere. It's just huge.
How much money?
Huh?
How much money did it make?
Well, then it was like $450 million, but today it'd be like.
I thought I should point that out.
But then today it would be like $1.5 billion, $1.5 billion. Okay, so it did really a lot of money, and it's gone on. Okay, so now what happens is the movie does really well, and I think this is great. We did it, done. But no, we get invited to go to the Oscars. We get 9 Oscar nominations. So I thought, well, that's good, but wow, now there's another hoop to jump through. Like, now I get to be nervous again for another year, something like that. So now we get invited to the Oscars, 9 nominations, and we're winning all these other nominations of other guilds prior to this event. And I'm told by everyone Apollo 13 is going to win for Best Picture. Everybody says it's going to win for Best Picture, NASA's greatest event, da-da-da-da-da. So now I'm at the Oscars, and positive we're going to win. I've got my tuxedo on. I've got a card with my speech ready. I've got it ready to go. And right next to me is Ron Howard, Tom Hanks, and then Jim Lovell, the actual astronaut. And the last envelope that gets opened at the Oscars is for Best Picture. That's the esteemed award. And Sidney Poitier is saying, he's going to announce it, and he's very deliberate, this Sidney Poitier. He's going very slowly, quite slowly. And he opens it up, and I imagine rather, an imperceptible bee coming out of his mouth. So I get up to get the Oscar. I walk towards the stage, just like this. I walk towards the stage, and he says, Braveheart. This is the biggest bummer of all time. So I walk back to my seat like this, just like this, backwards, on camera.
In front of everyone.
I'm walking backwards, so embarrassed. I turn around to look at my peers. One chairman of the studio goes, loser, like that, big L in his, and thinking, this is so horrible. Can't this just end? This is so bad. And I say to Ron, this is absolutely embarrassing. And then Tom Hanks goes, Brian. And then Jim Lovell grabs my wrist like this, and he goes, I never made it to the moon either. And so it put things in perspective, because this astronaut that was doing something that was quite exceptional didn't make it to the moon, and I just didn't win the Oscar. Anyway, that's the story. Okay.
So I would like to, on behalf of General Gillen and the West Point leader team, and of course the cadets, we would like to thank you all for spending some time with us this evening. All of those young men and women sitting out there will be soon fighting and winning our nation's wars, and so thank you for taking the time to spend with them, and thank you for all that you do for the Academy and for our Army.
Please be sure to tune in to the Inside West Point Ideas That Impact podcast next month. Remember, you can find this podcast as well as the other podcasts, journals, and books hosted or published by the West Point Press at westpointpress.com. So until next time.